And of course he starts out, as we already read, by accrediting himself, by telling him where he got what he got. And so in verse 10 again he says, "For do I now persuade men or God, or do I seek to please men? For if I yet pleased men, I should not be the servant of Christ." And man, that's another part of that verse that we miss so often. What does that say about all the people that are trying to please men instead of pleasing Christ? Although they stand up as servants of Christ, as ministers of righteousness, they're not servants of Christ. That's what he's telling us. And then he goes on to tell the Galatians, "But I certify you, brethren, that the gospel which was preached of me is not after man. I didn't tell you anything I learned from man. For I neither received it of man, neither was I taught it, but by the revelation of Jesus Christ." Amen. So he reminds them of his authority, and he reminds them that the testimony came from the risen Lord. And then let's go to chapter 2 and start with verse 1. He says, "Then 14 years after," excuse me, "I went up again to Jerusalem with Barnabas, and took Titus with me also. And I went up by revelation, and communicated unto them that gospel which I preach among the Gentiles, but privately to them which were of reputation, lest by any means I should run or had run in vain." He went up with Barnabas and Titus because of these brethren that had come down and spied on them to see what they were doing. Let's read verse 4 now. Did I read 4? No, 4. He says, so he went up because of these Gentiles. He says, "And that because of false brethren unawares brought in and came in privily to spy out our liberty, which we have in Christ Jesus, that they might bring us into bondage." So Paul's really straightforward. He says, these guys came down here, they snuck in and they spied on us, and they're trying to bring us back into bondage. And that's why we went up there. All right. Then let's go back to Acts. See what Luke has to say. Chapter 15, verse 4. And so they're doing like they agreed to. They're going up to Jerusalem. And it says, "And when they were come to Jerusalem, they were received of the church and of the apostles and elders, and they declared all things that God had done with them." So they were received by everybody, and they told everybody what was going on. And then verse 5 and 6, "But there rose up certain of the sect of the Pharisees, which believed." They believed in Jesus Christ, but they were religious leaders, "saying that it was needful to circumcise them and to command them to keep the law of Moses. And the apostles and the elders came together to consider this matter." This is the same argument that's going on today. I mean, it's the same thing with a few very small things changed, which is what makes this so amazing and so critical, with one exception, that at that time, God was close over their head. They were all looking to Jesus Christ for leadership. So they were challenged by some, and the leaders gathered to consider it. And now we'll go back to what Paul says about it in Galatians chapter 2, verses 2 and 3. He says again, "I went up by revelation, and communicated unto them that gospel which I preach among the Gentiles, but privately to them that were of reputation, lest by any means I should run or had run in vain." Paul communicated his gospel privately to them that seemed to be in charge or have a reputation, so that he wouldn't undermine them in front of everybody. He did it privately. And they didn't require, he says, Titus to be circumcised. Now, why, when he writes to the Galatians, is he saying that? Because that's what they were arguing, is that he should be circumcised.